Hi everybody, I'm Billy, and this is Antioch, Chapter 26, The Second Pendulum. This one's full of more offhand references to the second pendulum again. Whatever does that mean? I don't know. Something about Rin's tendency to ebb and flow, I suppose. Oversea, the sailors used pendulums and machines to tell the time. Ah well, I think I'm done for the evening. You go ahead. I'll take notes if I find anything on my own. Thanks. I'm sure she's got dinner on the table already. I'm sure mine does too. See you tomorrow. Oh, hang on. This is interesting. Here, before you go, listen to this. Emotional paths have such complex and dynamic arcs because they are further removed from the source and do not possess the pure force of instinctual paths, which are, of course, forbidden. Well, well, what do you make of that? Let me see that one. An old man, dark-skinned and topped with tight white curls, walked the busiest avenue of a city about to die, mindless of the thousands of passers-by. Dapper, horse-drawn buggies cruised the lane off the walk, and the populace surrounded him with pocket watches, parasols, and petticoats, fine suits, top hats, and bustles. He wore plainer clothes, and carried a brown paper bag. He stop-started through the revolving doors of Main Street's most expensive hotel, La Fleur du Sud, where he and his wife had been staying for a week, a lavish extravagance in celebration of their 30th anniversary. Every surface inside seemed to be cream-colored within a gilded lilt. The front clerk greeted him with her pretty smile and waved. The bellhop drew back the elevator door like an accordion. Its brass matched the buttons on his red velvet uniform. The bellhop's name tag read Beauchamp. He'd come in early for a double into the night shift. "Welcome back, sir. Did you find what you were looking for downtown?" The old man thought. He looks more like a Richie or a Timmy, but in fairness, no one really looks like a Beauchamp, do they? "Why, yes, I did. Right here in this bag. Thank you for inquiring after me, young man." "Very good, sir. It's too bad about our paper here." "Don't patronize me, Beauchamp." "Yes, it is unfortunate, but we all do the best we can. I could turn you inside out like a baked yam, boy." "Happy anniversary, sir." And then up to room 910. Its interior, crowded with finery and everything sculpted or draped, looked more like a still life than a living space. Elizabeth, his wife, adored it. She was out with her cringe relatives, preparing for the cringe party, and would be back later on. Right then he was alone. He sat down at a writing desk, so decoratively carved that it should rather be called an escritoire, and from his paper bag removed a bottle of ink and a sheaf of paper. They were special examples of those items. The paper had to last as a book, and had to flip from his thumb, just so. His work required longevity. "This isn't just something to be scribbled on hotel stationery and then forgotten, thank you very much, Beauchamp." The ink was rare. Modern inks faded after only a few decades, and would therefore never do. He tapped his pen in the well, and at the top of the first leaf wrote, "Dear Diary." Then he hunched over, laughing. He'd wanted to do that for years. He chuckled and smiled to himself for a while before putting the pen to paper again. 1159, September 31st, 7 o'clock in the evening. I'm remembering seeing Elizabeth's Dr. Jones. I called him Mr. Jones on purpose, expecting him to correct me. He didn't. Good for him. I think it was in the paper later that he'd beaten his wife with a poker. Or it might have been that I'd heard someone had beaten him at poker. I really can't remember. I answered his questions as truthfully as I could at the time. He diagnosed me with depression and suggested that I keep, of all things, a diary. Every time I think of that man, it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh to think anyone could imagine themselves qualified to recommend that I keep a diary. Still, since it does make me laugh so, perhaps he had an ancillary effect on my temper's improvement. The man might be a genius. I still can't stand the sight of anyone other than her, though, and her family is particularly base. I don't know how someone like Elizabeth could have come from people like them. They won't stay away from us either. Would that they were dismembered. She's been making an effort, so I don't have to see them too often, but the more time I spend away from them, the more I want, and the worse it is when I'm forced into their company again. Oh, they're not evil people, of course. They're just people. Every word makes me cringe. They suggest meaning with a language their mouths don't deserve to form. Every movement and every breath. I wouldn't destroy them like paper nests. like bug houses to disintegrate, their flesh falling away from their skeletons while they gape at themselves in horror. No, if they were collectively helpless and I could ignore the opportunity to aid them, I suppose I would not even do that, because they mean so much to her. But if I could live with Elizabeth in a world with no one else, oh, that would be paradise. Such everlasting beauty is in her spirit. That, for her, however, would be hell. And without her happiness, what would be the point of anything? Perhaps I've never been fit to live in this world, for which Elizabeth's family seems so perfectly designed. Hagfish in the slime. Fwah! All things considered, these last 30 years seem to have had a profound effect on me. It's so odd that I'd need to experience them in order to come to this night, but it's true. It really is true. I'm actually afraid of the evening at hand. That's quite encouraging. Elizabeth remarked that I seemed more tolerant today. I honestly love her. Success! How can I hate everyone as much as I do if I can have this boundless love for her? That's dishonest. I don't hate everyone, of course. I'd feel terrible if those rare friends of mine thought that, or the children. Perhaps I hate myself. What part of me is it that chooses what I want? Why do I want things that make others unhappy? Why do I want others to be happy? Why can't I simply be comfortable with their disappointment or their violent deaths and seek my own happiness? Elizabeth's sister is like that. She's vile, bouncing along without any concern for the displeasure she creates in others. In that way, she's stronger than I am. Her carelessness brings her happiness. My honor brings me misery. Oh, pish-posh, enough of this. Poor me and my poor honor. Elizabeth's sister flayed and screaming, all things coming into their own, and so, currently, I'm excited, afraid, and expectant. That pretty little clerk waved at me a moment ago on my way in. What a disgusting display. She most likely despises her occupation and would prefer that no one came in at all. How dare she lie to me with her smile? And that damned bellboy is an idiot. I'm angry and murderous. The door ka-chunked and rattled and then opened. Elizabeth came bustling in, out of breath, arms full of packages and bags, and a smile in her voice. Help! She was 65 years old, and looked so. She was natural. Her hair was pulled back into a bun of black and gray springs, and her deep brown eyes were lined from experience. She wasn't a youthful 65, but she'd been strong and healthy for the last 30. He laughed and went to her, leaving his work on the table. Lizzie, here, give me some of those. You'll hurt yourself. He lifted them from her until she could move like a person again. There was someone else in the hall with even more items on a cart. Beauchamp. He wheeled them in and unloaded them. The old man gave him a large, meaningless tip. Currency. Thank you, sir. That's very generous of you. You're worth every penny, young man. Elizabeth beamed at her husband. The big day's tomorrow. I can hardly wait. Everything's going to be perfect. Oh, never tell me where you got the money. He smiled and closed the door. All right. Don't be ridiculous. Tell me right this instant where you got the money. He laughed. I've told you. It's a surprise. He sat down on the bed and started looking through the bags. Let's have a good night tonight. I'll need it to face the hagfish tomorrow. Oh, I hate it when you call them that. It's my family. Can't you just call them the in-laws like a normal person? There's sure to be a box of sweets in one of these. I'll call them whatever word you like, but whatever word you like will taste of hagfish. You're awful. She saw his paper on the table and picked it up. At first glance, she thought he'd been writing something. On closer inspection, she was perplexed. What are these symbols, Zeke? Did you write this? What's that? Oh, yes, it's art. I've decided to throw it all away and become an artist. This hotel's inspired me. She frowned at him. You're such a liar. This isn't continental. It's strange looking. Cultish. Tell me what it is. You know, I think it might just be the sacred script of an ancient cult. She raised an eyebrow at him. I'm not joking. Now you tell me what this is. She knew her Zeke didn't study obscure foreign languages. He was a common, hard-working man, not a scholar. He cleared a space for her on the bed and patted it. Come sit next to me, my dear. She did, and he kissed her. Oh, soaring joy of love. Success. I'll tell you about everything tomorrow. Not only the secret of our newfound wealth, but another secret or two that will surprise you." Elizabeth paused, staring at him. "Zeke, I don't like this. We don't keep secrets from each other. The money is one thing, but this writing, and you're not telling me this isn't right. It's frightening." It was in his old, familiar face. How could you possibly be frightened of me? "Trust me, Lizzie." She relaxed. Of course she trusted him. They'd been through everything together. "You didn't need to do any of this, you know. You could have just gotten me flowers. I like flowers. So beautiful. What I'm going to share with you tomorrow will be better than flowers, I promise." She loved him too. She always had. They sat on the bed together talking and laughing about their plans and the celebration, and how he didn't really want to go to the party, but how he'd do it just for her. He liked to keep secrets with the truth. A few times that evening she tried to trick him into revealing something about their sudden outrageous fortune. It made him smile. She couldn't have known how good Ezekiel was at keeping secrets. He even taught her the script for the word love and had her write it in the book, without really revealing anything at all. Later, as they lay together in the dark, he waited patiently for her to fall asleep on her own. It didn't wake her when he rose. It rarely did anymore. Over the years she'd grown accustomed to sleeping alone. She didn't know it, but she'd never actually seen him asleep. She'd seen him with his eyes closed, certainly, but the truth was that Ezekiel hadn't slept in millennia. After age, sleep was the first thing he'd striven to overcome, mostly to keep from wasting the time. He'd overcome many of what he considered to be the frailties of life. Poised to do so with another, he lit a kerosene lamp with a match and sat down to write. 1159, September 32nd, 1 o'clock in the morning. We've lived the perfect life. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to appreciate what we've meant to each other. It has created love. True love, I'm sure of it. If I feel it, she must. Combined with her excitement over coming into a little money, the intrigue of new possibilities, she must be dreaming out of love right now. If only I could know those precious fantasies. If only I could know her mind like I know her body. I'm afraid of losing her. Everything is exactly as I thought it would be. I'm not ready yet, though. I'll wait another hour to prepare myself. That's not very long, each stroke of my pen being part of a second, each book then part of a year. What a strange thing time is. When the hour passed, he looked at her without his eyes. A shimmering reflection slept on the bed. Seeing her like that, there was nothing else in the room. He hesitated. Perhaps one more hour. No. Resolve. No more accidents. No more uncertainty. No more loss of control. Nothing out of hand. She can live forever if I'm strong enough to learn. I must be resolved. He exhaled, and then, from where he sat across the room, closed the way in her. Elizabeth's reflection went out like he'd turned the knob on a lamp. Only the tiniest lives were left smoldering in her body. What if I fail? Liz? Ezekiel's heart broke. That was the feeling he'd spent the last 30 years to achieve, the loss of a lifetime's devotion. He went to its source in a single stride, a giant in a land of dreams, and tore his grief and love loose until the Rin was a hurricane around him. He stood up from his chair in a seizure, eyes rolling back into his head. Now, return to me. He created a rushing, ethereal wheel out of the release, every strand of it masterfully woven to tear the way open again. But it skidded through dead flesh without effect. It isn't working. He gave it time, slipping into apprehension. Then he grabbed at facts from his memory and rammed them together, searching for a desperate combination that would accomplish what his careful planning had not. He couldn't let her go. When every emotional influence failed, he resorted to raw power. Ezekiel's despair led him to channel from paths that yielded chaos and misery in the past, forbidden paths of instinct and fundamental intent. He shocked Elizabeth's corpse with bursts of that terrible current. She wrenched and flexed on the bed, but went still when he stopped. He tried over and over, pushing and pulling, rowing those energies through her, until he realized she would not be revived. The way would not open. She would never live again. Her face was blank. She would never look at him again. He fell into his chair, trembling, questioning why, questioning everything. Then, though it pained him greatly, Ezekiel forced himself back to the desk. He could not allow his grief to change or to fade. His tears dotted and warped the page as he recorded what he felt. The sun peeked into the hotel's lobby. The gold and brass were dull brown borders around the cream. The elevator bell rang, the gate shrank to one side, and Ezekiel hurried out with his manuscript, wanting to leave that place behind forever. Beauchamp approached dutifully to extend the hotel's courtesy. Without breaking step, Ezekiel ripped a cord through him that unbound the young man's body. Beauchamp melted under the velvet into skin and bones, blood and grease, with the speed of gravity. Ezekiel chastised himself as he waded through the rotating doors. I shouldn't have done that to him. That was wrong. Then he joined the street's sporadic early morning flow. In an hour it would be teeming. He had to reach his children before they heard news of their mother's death. He had to keep trying until every path of his 30 years' work was exhausted. The key to resurrection could be within any of those relationships. He didn't know what he'd left in room 910. Ezekiel usually ignored the reflections of the smaller lives, those tiny things passing through moments of existence, allowing bigger things to function. Those voracious little beasts that eat their host from the inside when it dies. Mold from the ceiling of the apartment he'd shared with his wife for the last 11 years. Those sorts of lives. He didn't know he'd created a new kind of life, on a cellular level, by smashing the ones left in Elizabeth together. It wasn't the first such offshoot he was responsible for, not by far, nor was it the first to happen by accident. But this one was different from all the others. It was awake. Ezekiel had awakened it by channeling through instinct. While the relatively reserved and graceful influences of emotion would have been imperceptible to it, instinct was fundamentally understood. Through instinct it could draw power directly from the source, and each of its pieces would inherently know the way. It was a being without curiosity, its abilities and purpose defined by coincidental design. It could consume and reproduce, but only in a bed of human flesh. It could spore and take root, and it could use its dead hosts like machines to carry it to the living. The morning desk clerk sent for every emergency service in the city when he discovered Beauchamp's horrifying remains. Management wished he hadn't. They didn't want La Fleur du Sud to become one of those cheap tourist attractions, one of those haunted hotels. Yes, there had been a tragedy, but you don't just throw everything away because of it. Even as the coroner's office, the police, emergency physicians, guests, journalists, and the simply curious gathered downstairs, housekeeping was expected upstairs to carry out their duties. And Jalise had a family to care for. She knocked on the door to room 910 and said, "Housekeeping, do you need service?" Her voice told that her heart wasn't in it that day. Poor Beauchamp. Thump, 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 wham! It sounded like someone had charged across the room headlong into the door. Jalise stepped back, already on edge because of what was going on downstairs, and then made the connection. Whoever, or whatever, was inside room 910 could be the one who'd done Beauchamp that way in the lobby. Her hand went to her mouth. The door handle rattled like an animal was learning how to turn it. Chick-click, clack, chick-click-clack. Jalise left her cart right where it was and went apron flapping in a half-walk, half-run scuffle for the elevator. Zit! Zit is it! That's the killer in there, I just know it! What am I doing up here? Who stays at work on the day of a murder? Stupid, stupid, stupid! The door opened in the hall behind her, followed by footsteps. Thump, 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 and the dull resonance from the carpet of an empty upper-story hallway. Jalise turned around, bolt upright, fearing it was a man with a long knife. Elizabeth's black-eyed, smoking corpse was much worse. Jalise's face peeled back in a scream, and she staggered into the elevator alcove, swatting at the gate. "Open up! Oh, God! Help me, please! Help me!" The shadow was screaming. Elizabeth reached out for its shining heart. The wall behind it slid away, and they fell together to the floor. She caught it. It was right in front of her, so close, but the shadow was in the way. The shadow kept her from touching the light. She smashed it, bit into it, and tore at it, trying to get through. The screaming stopped. The light went out. The elevator bell rang in the lobby. Hundreds of lights, so bright, they swept away like the tide. She ran to them. While everyone else retreated, brave policemen stepped forward to capture Elizabeth, who was quite obviously a homicidal maniac. They overpowered her, handcuffed her, and dragged her struggling out of the hotel. The coroner stayed, wiping his burning face, baffled by the two deaths that were left. What seemed to have caused one didn't seem likely to have caused the other. The hotel would have to be evacuated. Those passing through the lobby carried the smoke away in their bodies and on their clothes. Jalise rose later in the morgue. So began the fall. That is the end of chapter 26. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can follow the link at the top of my website, www.williameharlan.com, and purchase the full novel from Amazon in ebook format for $2.99 or as a paperback for $12.99. Thanks for listening. Tune in next week for chapter 27, 135ers.